Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for the BusinessWorks year-end webinar this morning. My name is Sherry Simmerman, and I'm with DWD Technology Group. If you're having any issues with the webinar, connecting to the webinar, or being able to hear the webinar, please reach out to Rick Huddleston at 260-423-2414. He can go ahead and help you with those issues. All right, next slide. So we are offering CPE credit for this morning's webinar. If you would like CPE, we're offering 1 credit for the first session and 1 credit for the second session, which is the payroll session. Just go ahead and email Shannon Barnhart, and her email address is on the screen. And then in the subject line of the email, if you could put CPE credit, and then she'll get that sent to you. And we'll also provide her contact information at the end of this first session. Next slide, please. So I'm going to cover just a bit of housekeeping information, and then we'll talk just briefly about DWD Technology Group. So for the webinar, we've got a number of people attending this morning. So we're going to keep everyone muted until the end of the presentation. Then we'll open things up for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can use the chat box that's part of the webinar tool and just type in your question and submit it. Or at the end of the presentation, if you'd like to click on, there's a little hand that you can click on that tells me that you have a question, and we'll unmute you and we'll let you ask your question, and we'll go ahead and answer it then. All right, so just a little bit about DWD Technology Group. We have been around for 30 years, and we've been supporting BusinessWorks for nearly that amount of time. We're a division of a CPA firm. We're located in Indiana. We have offices in Fort Wayne, Marion, and Indianapolis. We've got a total technology team of about 22, 23 people. 10 of those are software consultants. We also offer IT services, so 11 of those are network engineers. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we offer for businesses using BusinessWorks: we provide implementation and setup services. We can help you with support issues. We provide training that's customized to whatever your specific need is. It can be for one person, it can be for a team of folks. We can help you with upgrades, integration with third-party applications. We have a gal that is very knowledgeable with Crystal reports, and she can help you with custom Crystal reports. We also do imports, data file rebuilds, and if you feel like you're not getting enough out of BusinessWorks, we can sit down with you and kind of take a look at how you're using the software and see if there's any ways that maybe there can be some efficiencies that you could gain from that. Next slide, please. All right, so this morning, I'm going to turn it over to Betty Baker. Betty has been with DWD for a long time and has a lot of knowledge, years of knowledge with BusinessWorks, and she's going to be presenting the year-end information this morning. Take it away, Betty.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining. One of the important things to talk about when you're talking about doing your year-end close, especially for folks who have been on BusinessWorks a long time, is looking at your history retention and archiving your company data. The screens that you're looking at here, I'm asking what's your history retention set to in your module setups. A lot of people may not even know where to find what that is. And under the utilities menu of every module, you'll see it says display status. So if it's general ledger, if it's AP, like the screens you see here, it says specifically what you set that to. So in this example, in the demo company, we see that the AP status is only set to keep history for 3 months, but general ledger says 2 years. So you want to standardize these things and make sure that they are the same throughout your history retention and all of your modules. The place you go to change that is under Utilities for every module under the Maintain Parameters option. So we all know if you use order entry and inventory control in BusinessWorks, those are really tightly bound together. And if you look at display order status in order entry, it's going to show you all 3 of those together. And so again, you want to standardize these so that they all match. And when you archive your company, they will keep all of the same amount of history together. So when you set your history retention, you want to look at making sure that you don't set it too high. If you look to the right, it says points to remember are setting history retention too high. It's going to increase your record search time, and it will bog down the printing of your reports. If you're experiencing delays in reports accumulating, it typically has to do with the fact that you've got a large amount of history there. So keep your history retention 2 to 3 years is a good choice, and then archive your company at the end of the year so that you can have a picture of the last year that is in that particular company code, and you can close your live data and go back to the old to the new one that you've archived. If you need help learning how to archive your company, just give DWD a call and we'll walk you through how to do that. But that's an invaluable tool for making sure you don't lose history just because you set history retention to a certain amount of time. The other thing about history retention, it also means that you can't delete things. So let's say you create a general ledger account number and you accidentally give it an incorrect account type so it shows up in the wrong place in your financial statement. Well, true, you can make a journal entry to reclass that, but you then cannot get rid of that account number from the date that you posted that if you set history retention for 3 years. And you can filter it out of your lookup, but that's an extra mouse click. So it's best to keep your retention lower where you can, at the end of the year, clean up your account numbers if you want to, because you're not married to it for 8 years. The same for your customers and for your vendors. People who are no longer in business are people who are that you no longer do business with, or even your part numbers who very often get duplicated and there's not a way to merge those together in BusinessWorks. So if you've got those situations and you do a fiscal close, if the history retention is low, that gives you the ability to delete some of those and clean up your list. So by creating a new company code, and again, if you don't know how to create a new company code, that's done from your System Manager Utilities menu. You would call it, say, the Demo Company 2019. And so what you do is a backup of your live data, and you restore that to the new company code. And that Demo 2019 company will never undergo a fiscal close. So it forever captures the 2 to 3 years history retention on everything in it. And when your live data goes under a fiscal close, it dumps that history retention, and you now have your current year and 2 years back of history, and the ability to clean things up like I mentioned. So the other thing we want to be aware of is prior period posting. This is something I like to bring into sharp focus for everybody because it's something that when you install BusinessWorks, you may or may not be even aware of. When you click on Utilities at the top of the launcher, that menu list is the System Manager. If you look for the System Preferences option, you'll see where you control prior period posting, where the blue arrow is. This should always be set to No until the appropriate person or a person of authority changes it to allow a change to an already closed period. So if you look to the right, Yes means you can post to and therefore change a closed fiscal year. What's important to understand about yes is that if you make an entry, let's say you're going to record depreciation for last year. If you make an entry that debits depreciation and credits accumulated depreciation, what you don't see is BusinessWorks will go right behind you and credit depreciation and debit retained earnings. So anytime you post to a prior fiscal year, which is what yes is intended to do, there's a total of 4 entries there. So you want to make absolutely sure when you turn on to yes, it's because you've been provided journal entries from your CPA at the end of the year after they've done your tax return, and they say you need to make these entries so that your balance sheet is correct. No means no. And don't allow postings to prior periods. If I have done my month-end reconciliations and I have printed my financial statements and I've presented them to my investors, my banker, or my management, then I don't want anybody changing anything. So predominantly, to control your environment, leave that set to no. Current fiscal year only means just that. Post to or make an adjustment to the current fiscal year. Somebody in accounts payable actually posted the property tax to telephone. So make a journal entry in the current fiscal year to just reclass that expense. But predominantly, you want your prior month posting set to no. 99% of the problems related to your bank reconciliation not matching GL will have to do with this setting. The best practice is to reconcile your accounts, print your financial statements, close your period, and make sure prior period posting is set to no. Another option in this particular screen where it says uppercase city and state, if you are currently using all of your customers and your vendors in all uppercase, if you check that box in the center, it will actually bring in the city and state in uppercase once you enter the zip code. The information below that, where it says informational messages, this is where you set whether or not you get these, some people call annoying messages, like print an alignment test, which nobody does anymore because everybody is pretty much using laser type documents now. Payroll tax deposits are required, prior period posting. You definitely want that set to yes. But go through those and see if those are set the way that would best work for your business. So let's talk about what BusinessWorks versions are supported with Sage software. Sage only supports 2 versions at a time. So if you're currently running 2017 or lower, it's no longer supported by Sage software. So what does that mean? Does it still work? It absolutely does. But if you run into an issue, Sage will not, like corrupt data, for instance, we have to get a data repair from Sage because we can't get down into Pervasive and fix it ourselves. Then we have to call Sage, and Sage will say, tell them to upgrade to current level and see if that fixes the issue. Your client care plan that you renew every year includes your new versions. So if you're already current on your plan, these upgrades are available to you to be applied, and they don't take that long. And the service packs that accompany these upgrades may have critical tax table updates in them. So it's very important to keep your software at least 1 version back. 3 is going to be risky, and it will have your business go down if you get stuck. A lot of people ask, so keeping your business on your current version of Sage BusinessWorks, why do I need to upgrade? I don't need new bells and whistles. My BusinessWorks is stable, and it works just fine, and all of that is true. While we love that BW is stable and works great as it is, the truth is Sage will only support 2 versions at a time. So currently, that's 18 and 19. So again, as I mentioned previously, if your data becomes corrupt and you need a data repair, Sage will require you to first upgrade to a current level and see if that fixes the issue. And in the meantime, your company is down. And it never happens on a convenient time. So just be proactive. and arrange to get that upgrade done, and you don't have those kind of worries. So again, talking about upgrades. Upgrades are not all about new bells and whistles, but they often fix known issues in previous versions that service packs or updates did not fix. The other issue is we all live in a Microsoft world here. So if Microsoft issues a new operating system and the version you're running of BusinessWorks is not supported by Sage on that operating system, it's another delay in getting you fixed. DWD can provide you what we call an SPM, which is a supported platform matrix that will tell you exactly what workstations and servers are supported for the BusinessWorks version you're currently running or you need to move to. You pay annually for the most current and up-to-date version of Sage BusinessWorks and all of the product updates that keep it running. So take advantage of what you already own by keeping its engine running at optimum speed and capacity. Older versions also are not applicable to product updates that may include tax tables. So if you're running payroll, you need to be on a current level all the time so that you know your tax tables are correct, or you have to manually change them. The easiest way to close every month, in case you don't know about this, is company close. If you go again to the utilities menu at the top of the launcher and select company close, the following screen displays. And there's that little pesky skip backup button, which we should never be allowed to do. But the company close option never skip the backup. When the computers lock up or the power goes out during this process, nobody at DWD or Sage can tell you where it stopped in that closing process. The closing process is actually moving what is currently in the month-to-date bucket of your customers and vendors and your parts into month-to-date into year-to-date, and whatever is in the future month is moved into month-to-date. So there's a whole lot of cooking going on in that close process when you see that little blue line running. So your only fallback position is to restore from a backup. So whenever you do a close and it recommends that you back up, please do yourself a favor and do that quick and dirty backup inside BusinessWorks. It doesn't take any time. On this screen, when you come to company close, you can check all of the modules that you want to close, and when you click OK, it will ask you to type in the month that you're closing, and it will do them all for you at one time instead of going to every module to the close menu under each one. This is particularly useful for AR, OE, and IC, as those three have to close together. Always pay attention to the red font and all of its warnings, because those are there for a reason. So talking again about tax table updates. Tax table updates contain changes to federal and state withholding tax tables, wage limits, state disability percentages, and or state and unemployment limits, which vary from state to state. Tax table updates may not be applied. This is very, very important. I probably should have put this in red font. If you've been on BusinessWorks for a long time, you understand your tax table updates at the end of the year should never be applied until you have completed your W-2s and your fourth quarter payroll tax returns, and they have been filed. Tax table updates are global. So what that means is, even if I make an archive of that company and I go back later and do my W-2s and my 941s in the archive company, if I was to load the new tax table for January, it would change those reports even in my archive company. So it's very, very important. Even though Sage may notify you the new tax tables are available, you can certainly download them any day, but you do not apply them until all your fourth quarter returns are complete. So the proper closing of modules at the end of the year, of course, make your backup first, is if you're running payroll, you have to close payroll first. And I always recommend to everybody to create an archive company of payroll and call it the W-2 company for 2019 or 2018, whatever year it is. that's the company that you would actually go back to and prepare your W-2s and your 941s. And that frees you up if you have a payroll on January 4th in your live data. You don't have to knock yourself out to get all your tax returns and your W-2s printed, because all of that's safely in an archive company. You can close your payroll and move forward. Yes, the tax tables may be a little different for January, but for the month of January, which is when you're going to be doing that anyway, the differences in any tax table adjustments are really minor, and BusinessWorks will self-adjust those, so don't worry about that. It will take care of that for you. Your next module that you would close would be accounts payable, but that would be only after you've entered all of your invoices for the period and obviously also done all of your bank reconciliations. As I mentioned previously, AR, order entry, and inventory control have to close together. If you're running the job cost module, the same thing for it. And then, of course, lastly would be your general ledger after you've made all of your journal entries and decided that that financial statement is what you're going to provide to your CPA for your tax return. So, as I mentioned in accounts payable, prior to closing, reconcile all of your bank accounts. Enter all your invoices as applicable to December. Run accounts payable aging after all the invoices have been entered. And prior to posting anything for January, you want to be sure that you have an aging that will match your balance sheet. Unfortunately, in BusinessWorks, once you post future transactions, the aging will change and it won't match your balance sheet. You may have already noticed that. So you want to make sure that you get all of your data entered for the month of December, and or provide yourself a cutoff to when that's going to be, and then everything else may be posted the next month. We're typically only talking about maybe 5 to 6 days before all those invoices come in anyway. But once you, just remember, once you post anything to January, it will distort your aging and it will no longer tie to your balance sheet. And you also want to run your 1099s. If you have any questions about why your 1099 vendor may or may not be showing up, give us a call or ask a question and we'll walk you through where to turn all that on. So the effects of year-end processing and accounts payable, it purges invoices from AP in the open invoice file and transaction history based on what we talked about earlier, the date of the time that is set up in your parameters to maintain information. And also the same thing for your check history. So you want to make sure, again, that those things match. Printing 1099s is now powered by Aatrix. If you run payroll, you already know what Aatrix is, but Aatrix is a provider that produces all of the tax forms and tax returns in the software these days. It does require an active maintenance support plan with Sage in order to have access to these, and the federal copy must be printed on the pre-printed form. The recipient copy, however, can be printed on a blank form, and the supporting 1099-96 summary and transmittal of the U.S. returns are also included on that particular function. In accounts receivable, again, you want to make sure all data entry is posted. And if you've reconciled your bank statements, there should be no question that all the cash receipts have been entered and all invoicing has been performed for accounts receivable and order entry. Order entry is pretty easy, I would imagine, simply because if you're shipping out of a warehouse, you really know what went out that last day. Accounts receivable, if you're billing for services and that type of thing, you want to pay closer attention to make sure that all of your invoicing was done for the month of December. Then you would apply any finance charges after you do invoicing and print your customer statements. By the way, printing customer statements in BusinessWorks is kind of odd. If you print them first, they're really very busy. But if you print them a second time, it will edit out a lot of the payment information and only show you actually what's outstanding. That's a requested enhancement that has been made to Sage for multiple years to change that, but that's the way those print. Prior to posting to any future period, just like it is in accounts payable, you must run your accounts receivable aging in order to reconcile your balance sheet to that list. So again, AR year-end processing will purge the invoices in the AR open invoice file and relevant to the number of days that you've told history retention to maintain. But if you've archived your company, that last year, of course, will still be in your archive. But this will clean that out going forward and allow you to have your current year and 2 years prior. In inventory management, prior to posting any future periods, you must perform your physical count in order to have your stock status agree with your balance sheet. So if you're performing a physical count, you want to freeze your inventory and you want to count, correct your quantities, and run the stock status report and use it to tie out to your balance sheet or see if you have to make some necessary adjustments. Highly, highly recommend, excuse me, that you reconcile purchases receiving in general ledger. If that has not been done, you really will not know whether or not a receipt of goods was missed. It has happened because if you enter a vendor's invoice and you debit that to purchases clearing, but the receipt of goods was never done, which would credit purchases clearing, you'll end up purchases clearing has a debit balance, and the only way you catch that is by reconciling that. So if that's not a current monthly reconciliation, we highly recommend you get into that practice and match your receipts against what the vendors billed you and make sure that there were none outstanding before you start doing your count, because otherwise they won't agree. In General Ledger, you want to make sure all your other modules integrating with GL have had their activity posted and are closed. You want to print and post any recurring journals if applicable, depreciation, prepaid insurance, prepaid expenses, and then make your final adjustments to your general ledger prior to your fiscal year-end close. Excuse me. And prior to your close is, of course, when you want to make your archive. The effects of the year-end processing in general ledger, of course, close your entire income statement into retained earnings. So based on the number of years to retain history and the number of years to retain summary history, the beginning balances recalculate for the respective data files. So again, my comment about if you turn on prior period posting to yes, this first bullet, since you know it's closing things into retained earnings, in my example, if you debit depreciation and credit accumulated, because the fiscal year close has already occurred and BusinessWorks knows that, it will go right behind you and credit depreciation and debit retained earnings, because that's what the process of a fiscal year end does in GL. Anybody have any questions?
Okay, if you have questions, you can either enter them into the chat box, or there's a little hand that's on your GoToWebinar tool. If you click on that, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, and we can ask questions through the phone. Right now, I don't see any questions. All right. If you have questions, we're going to take a break from now. So it's 9:30 right now. We will come back at 10 o'clock, and we will cover the payroll portion of the webinar. If between now and then you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or submit them in the chat box. Beth, let me unmute you here. It looks like you've got your hand raised still. All right, Beth, you're unmuted. Did you have a question for us?
Oh, excuse me. No, I was talking to whoever's being kind enough to tell me my audio stopped working, so I had to click over. So I've just been talking to somebody who's been helping me.
All right. There was another person that had their hand. Oh, here we go. Kelly, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Kelly, you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question. We can't hear you. If possibly, maybe you have your own phone muted too.
I apologize.
There you go.
I wanted to ask if I apologize, I signed on late, if the copy of this presentation will be sent to the attendees?
Yes, all attendees will receive a copy of the presentation, and we'll also provide you a link to the recorded webinar.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, Darlene, we've got another question here. Darlene, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. All right, Darlene, you're unmuted. Oh, she said that's okay. We just answered her question. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, feel free, if you have questions between now and 10 o'clock when we start the payroll portion, feel free to either enter them into the chat box or raise your hand, and I'll continue to keep an eye on that. Christine, I see you have a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. All right. Go ahead and ask your question. Oh, Christine's question, Betty, so she's got a question. Why does it say statement not printed in company close, even though you have printed this statement?
Which company? Which module? AR?
She doesn't have that listed here. Christine, we've got you unmuted if you want to. Yes, in AR.
Okay. Did you preview them or did you print them literally?
Oh, she printed them.
Interesting. Not sure. What version and service pack is she on? If she clicks on Help and About at the top.
Okay. Version 2019, Bronze Plan. Do you know what the service pack is, Christine?
What product update? It should say SP something. It's real important when you upgrade your software to make sure that you also download any service packs. I think there is 2 available on 2019 currently. We'll be glad to look into that for you if that's a known issue.
Okay, she says she's trying to look for the service pack. Can you explain to her again where she might see that?
At the top of the launcher, if you click on Help and then About, it should say version 2019 and it should have an SP after it.
She says it has 2019 but nothing with an SP.
Okay, that's pretty typical, and whoever did your upgrade, you want to make sure that when they download the new version, they also go back and check for service packs. There's actually 2 out there. We want to make sure to apply those 2, and then after that, if you're still having the issue, we can look and see, ask Sage why it's doing that.
All right, well, we're going to take a 15-minute break here. At 10 o'clock, we'll start the payroll portion of the presentation. All right, Betty, if you want to go ahead and advance the slide, we'll go ahead and get started with the second portion of the webinar here. Oh, there we go. All right, well, good morning. My name is Sherry Simmerman. This morning, we're going to be talking about year-end tips for BusinessWorks, and this session is specifically going to cover payroll. Thanks, everyone. A big thanks to everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule to attend us here this morning. If you want to go ahead and advance the slide, Betty. We are offering CPE credit for this session and for the session earlier, all you need to do is email Shannon Barnhart. Her email address is on the screen right now, and just put CPE credit in the subject line of the email, and let her know if you attended one or both sessions, and she'll get that CPE sent to you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to cover just some basic housekeeping, and then also a little bit about DWD Technology Group. First off, because we've got a few other people that have joined us, we've got a number of people on this call, so we're going to keep everyone muted during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll open things up. You can submit questions through chat, or you can raise your hand using the webinar tool. There's a little picture of a hand. If you click on it, that lets us know you have a question. We can unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask your question that way too. The webinar will be recorded. Everybody at the end of the session, either later today or tomorrow, we'll go ahead and send everyone the webinar slides and a link to the recorded presentation. So just a little bit about DWD. We're located in the Midwest. We're a division of a CPA firm. We've got 3 offices in Indiana, one in Fort Wayne, one in Marion, one in Indianapolis. Our business consists of software consultants and network engineers. We've got about 23 people total, and 10 are software consultants, and a little bit more than 11 are network engineers. Go ahead and advance the slide. We've actually been in business for 30 years, and we've been supporting BusinessWorks for almost that full 30 years. As far as services related to BusinessWorks, we can help clients with implementation and setup. We provide support services for issues that you're experiencing with BusinessWorks. We offer training that is customized to your specific need, and we can do that for one person or for your team. We also offer upgrades, integration with third-party applications. We've got a gal here that is very knowledgeable with Crystal reports and can help you with custom Crystal reports. We can also help with data imports, exports, data file rebuilds. And then if you feel like maybe you're not using your system to the fullest, we can help you kind of review how you're using your software and see if there's any ways that you can achieve efficiencies with that. All right, go ahead, next slide. All right, so this morning, Betty Baker, who has years of experience with BusinessWorks, is going to go over some important things that you should note with payroll year-end. She's also going to cover payroll, year-end processing, printing payroll forms with Aatrix. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Betty.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning. I'm anxious to talk to you about important things to remember about your closing your payroll at the end of the year. One of the things, and this kind of brought to my attention after the last session, if you don't know for sure exactly what version you're running of BusinessWorks and whether or not you're running current service packs, if you click on Help at the very top of your launcher and then click About, that will show you what version of BusinessWorks you're running. If you don't see the letters SP with some numbers after that, then you have not applied important service packs that have been released by Sage over the year, and not only provide some bug fixes, but may also indeed have some tax table updates that need to be loaded. So one of the first things I would urge you to do is to check that and make sure that the version that you're running has the highest level of SP behind it. And the way you find out what that is you can actually check with us at DWD, or you can actually log on to your customer portal and go to the download of BusinessWorks, and it will show you what the current available service packs are. Back to the payroll close, the important things to remember is that way back in 2013 was the last year that Sage themselves maintained and supported Form 499, 1099, and accounts payable and W-2s in payroll. All of those are done now by Aatrix, which we should all be familiar with because we have to go to enhanced tax filing in order to generate all of those, and you're all familiar now probably with the spreadsheet and how that operates. So as of 2014, users preparing their own payroll tax forms had to utilize the state and federal e-filing reporting that was powered by Aatrix. And you actually can e-file those forms or you can print them. If you e-file, there's obviously a modest charge for that. Most folks will just print them out themselves and mail them like they always did, but e-filing is certainly an option. But the ability to print the form and fill it out yourself in the old drop-down menu will tell you you need to go to the e-filing form now to do that. So let's talk first about what versions are currently supported with BusinessWorks. Sage software only supports 2 versions at a time. So if you're currently running version 2017 or earlier, it's no longer supported by Sage. That means that does it still run on your servers and your workstations? It absolutely does. But if you have any issues with those older versions and you need a data repair, Sage won't do it unless you're upgraded to a current version because they say that that probably will fix whatever your issue is. A lot of times that's related also to a change in operating system on your workstation. And so you want to make sure that you're running a current version, especially if your client care plan is current. That includes the new version. All you need to do then is call DWD, we'll get you upgraded and apply the current service packs, and you'll be exactly where you need to be in case there's any issues with your data. The most important thing, obviously, to do before you close the payroll quarter, not just the year end, but any quarter, is to make sure you have a backup inside BusinessWorks. There is always a prompt before you close asking you if you have done a backup. If you're not familiar with how to do the backups, if you just click on File in the top left-hand corner of your launcher, backup is an option there. And you can walk through, select your company code, and do a backup there. But if you go to the close function, the close function also has a little button that says backup or skip the backup, which I wish they would take off because you should never skip a backup. In the payroll close, your terminated employee history may be kept if you do not choose that option to delete them. There is a checkbox there, so that's up to you as to whether or not you do that. We recommend creating an archive of your payroll prior to printing your W-2s and your payroll tax returns so that you can close your live data and print your checks for January. If you're not familiar with how to archive, we discussed that in the previous session that we did, but basically you go to your system manager, create a new company called the W-2 company for 2019, do a backup of your company, and restore that to the W-2 company. And now you have the luxury of deleting employee history in your current install, and all of that history is maintained in the W-2 company, and you got till January 31st then to do your tax returns and your W-2s at your leisure, and you can print checks that are dated January and your live data and just keep going. A lot of people have payrolls that are due on January 3rd and 4th, and they put undue pressure on themselves for getting the W-2s printed and the payroll tax returns done in that amount of time, where if you create the archive of your company, again, and call that company the W-2 2019 company, now you have the entire month of January to prepare those and get those out within the time limit required. Aatrix reporting, which is federal and state and e-filing reporting, can refer to prior periods, by the way. So if you needed to print another return, all you need to do is change the dates and the quarter in the bottom of that screen, and that will allow you to reprint anything you need to print. So what happens during year-end processing? In 2019, the quarter-to-date and year-to-date deductions and taxes are reset. Quarter-specific reports will show only the current quarter activity. Terminated employees deleted only if that option is selected. Employee direct deposit for year-to-date is set to 0. And after the processing of the W-2s and the payroll tax returns for federal and state have been completed, that's when you need to install the new tax table updates. The printing the tax forms in Aatrix must have the federal and state e-filing and reporting installed on the computer from which that will be printed. If you don't, it will simply come up and tell you that it doesn't have it. Just answer yes, it will install it for you. And if you do not have a current Sage BusinessWorks maintenance plan, it will not let you proceed. So if you're running payroll, you absolutely now have to be on a current BusinessWorks plan. It will not let you use the state and e-filing reporting unless it pings the Sage servers and recognizes that your plan is current. So printing the tax forms via Aatrix, Form 940, which we all know is an annual return, although you should have been paying those taxes from the drop-down under taxes, Form 940, for what you owe every quarter, but the return itself is an annual return. Form 941, your employer's quarterly federal tax return, and then your W-2s. And your W-2s are now printed on white paper that is perforated for 4 to a page with the IRS instructions on the back, what I refer to as legal mumbo-jumbo. And you can order these directly from Sage software. You can print them on white paper, but I don't think the IRS approves those simply because it doesn't have IRS instructions on the back of the form. So call Sage Software, tell them what product you're using, and you need to order the 4 to a page perforated white paper for W-2 printing. And again, those would be printed out of your archive company we talked about previously. And those also can be e-filed if you prefer to do that. Not every one of your employees may have an email address, however, so you want to make sure if you choose the e-filing option that you've tested the email address for those employees and make sure, because you certainly don't want that going to the wrong place. So printing tax forms via Aatrix, your state tax forms, these exact forms may vary by state. For unemployment and withholding, those are the form numbers there for Indiana. If you're in a different state, your form code would be different. As I mentioned previously, your W-2s now print on white paper, and they can be filed for additional, e-filed for additional fees. Now, you can e-file. You can choose whether you e-file the employees as well as the forms to the IRS, or you can just e-file the forms to the IRS and print the forms to your employees. So if you need help understanding those options once you get into the Aatrix wizard, certainly call DWD for help, and we'll be glad to walk you through what the best choices for that are. Indiana law does require that 25 or more employee returns must be e-filed with the state. So Aatrix updates are scheduled to be available in December, so we recommend checking Sage online for availability. But remember, these may not be applied until all of the W-2s have been completed and all your payroll tax returns have been filed. And the reason for that is your new tax tables for the next year will actually change the FICA and Medicare limits, and that will distort your return if you load them before. No need to worry about January starting without current tax tables. By the time you finish your W-2s and your 941s, if you've done payrolls in the month of January and there are any returns to the federal withholding tables, BusinessWorks will self-adjust those, so don't worry about it. Your employees may have questions when you finally do apply those tax tables that their net is different either up or down depending on the change in the table, but BusinessWorks self-adjusts that. You don't have to worry about it. When you get into Aatrix, this is the screen you will see that verifies whether or not you have, number one, an active internet connection so it can talk to Aatrix, and also whether or not you have a current business care plan. to make you eligible to print these and use that. So once your account is validated, you'll be required to install the updates. Always just click automatic update, and the wizard will walk you through application of that to update the forms. So if you encounter any errors trying to update, be sure to add the Aatrix.com to your trusted website in Internet Options on the Security tab. On the Privacy tab, click on Sites and Allow, and this will be the addresses here. You might also verify your firewall settings. If you need any help with this, our technical group will be glad to walk you through that. But typically, this works pretty seamlessly, and depending on your own firewall and internet security, you may bump into some of this, but again, if you do, just give us a call. We'll be glad to help you with that. So the direct link to the home page of your Sage BusinessWorks desktop, this is the customer support portal. This is where you go to access the knowledge base for errors that you receive, product information, and software downloads. Like I mentioned, click on Help and About at the top of your launcher, and it will show you what your version is. But every version should have an SP behind it and with a certain number. So if you're on 19, I believe our current service packs are 2. If you're on 2018, I think there may be 5. You always want to make sure your service packs are current. In Sage, if you have signed up in your customer portal here, the person who signed up as your contact should be receiving an email when a new service pack is released, and you always want to keep those current. Anybody have any questions?
All right, if you have questions, feel free to use the webinar tool to raise your hand, or you can submit questions via the chat box. And we'll wait just a minute here for anybody that might have a question. And again, we'll send the presentation slides and a link to the recorded presentation to everyone after the webinar. I'm not seeing any questions right now. Oh, here we go. Nick has a question. Nick is asking, would you mind recapping the archival end-of-year process?
Be glad to. So what you want to do before you close your payroll is under the System Manager menu at the top of the launcher where it says Utilities, you want to go to Maintain Companies. And you're going to create a new company code. And in my example, if I use W-2 2019, your company code itself cannot have any spaces or characters in it other than letters. So call your new company W-2 2019, save that. Next thing you want to do is go to File and then Backup and do a backup of your live data. Once you do that backup, you'll go to File and Restore. And when you go to the Restore wizard, it's going to ask if you want to restore to the default company code, which will be your new one, your current one. And then there's a checkbox that says Restore to a new company or a different company. You want to check that box and type in W-2 2019, and that puts the entire picture of your company before you close your payroll into the W-2 2019 company code. Now you're free to go back to your live data and close your payroll and print any checks in January that you need. And when you're ready to do your W-2s and print your 941s and your state returns, all you do is switch companies to your W-2 2019 company code and go in and print all your forms from there, because there's not going to be any more checks generated out of there, and the returns are ready to be prepared. One thing I want to mention to everybody, when you create this new company, you need to be sure you're logged in as manager and go to security. And if you log in a different way, you want to make sure you give yourself access to the W-2 2019 company. Otherwise, when you try to access it, will tell you you don't have that level of access. If you log in as manager, it'll let you in. But when you create a new company code, you have to be sure that you go into security and make sure that you give whatever your ID, if you log in via your initials, you want to make sure that that ID has access to the W-2 2019 company. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect. All right, we've got another question. Joyce Hughes has a question. Joyce, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So, all right, you are unmuted.
The new company, W-2 2019. How long do you want to keep that?
You can keep it as long as you want. Most of our customers keep that indefinitely, and that W-2 2019 company will never close. And the huge advantage to that is if I need to, if somebody tells me they washed their W-2 in the washer, all I do is I go back to the W-2 2019 company, I print them a new one.
Okay, but if, excuse me, if I update the taxes, does that change the taxes in all of those companies?
It does. It does. The tax tables are global. That's why you're never going to apply your tax table updates until all of your forms and your W-2s and your 941s have been filed.
So if somebody washed their W-2 and you need to reprint it, does it still have the correct amount?
No, you would have to reread that, and you're not going to have it reread it. You're just going to go. It's going to ask if you want to use your saved reports, and you're going to say yes, and you'll just go print it from there. You have a reprint. Have you been through Aatrix before? Because you have a reprint option in there. So you wouldn't have it reread all of that. You would just go to the reprint function and reprint it from there.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Good question.
Oh. All right, we've got another question. Robert White, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Joyce, I can't get you muted again, just so you're aware. All right, Robert has a question, and he says, we have always printed W-2s for the past 20 years from an archive of the current company. At times, we need to make an adjustment mid-January to the archive company prior to printing W-2s, disability, sick pay, etc., which is fine, but this adjustment is not in the current live company. How can we make sure these adjustments are also posted in the live company?
I'd be interested to know what those adjustments are, and do they change your tax position? Did you void a payroll check, or what exactly the adjustment is? Can you explain further?
I'm not able to unmute Robert, so if you're able to...
You want to give him just our number, and I'll be glad to just call him.
Yeah, yep, we can do that.
Okay. I'd like to really understand.
All right. We've got another question here from Linda Quinn. Should I have a separate archive company as discussed in the earlier session, separate from the W-2 company?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
She asked, hold on a minute here, sorry, I just lost it. Should I have a separate archive company as discussed in the earlier session, separate from the W-2 company?
I would recommend that, yes, because the payroll archive has to be done pretty quickly, and you won't have the other reconciliations done in time. The W-2 2019 company allows you to go ahead and close your payroll for the end of December and start printing checks in January, which a lot of people have to do on the third or the fourth day. So, but you will, by that time, not have had time to reconcile your bank statements or your agings or your inventory or any of those things. So that's a separate archive entirely.
All right, she thanks you for that information. Anybody else have any questions? Again, if you do, you can use the chat box or raise your hand and we'll unmute your line. All right, I'm not seeing anything. So each of you will get an email from us. And if there's questions that you have following the webinar, feel free to submit those to us and we'll be happy to help everyone. And also everybody will get a link to the recorded webinar. And thanks to everyone for taking time out and joining us this morning. And we're gonna go ahead and close out the webinar. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.